Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that moves, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. There we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and we've got some more moves to break down as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 235. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with a couple of guests this week. First up, I'm talking with Greg Cosell about a couple of the moves the Eagles reportedly made over the weekend by signing safety Will Parks and linebacker Jatavis Brown. We'll hear from Greg about what both guys have done out in the AFC West and how they'll both fit in the Eagles' defensive scheme at the top of the show. But that's not all we've got today, because I want to roll out a conversation I had with Eagles legend Ike Reese, and this was a fun one. We recorded a few weeks ago, and this was just all about Ike's football life, his journey from being a high school player all the way up through the end of his NFL career and who impacted him along the way. Ike was coached by Nick Saban, he was coached by Jim Johnson, and there were countless of great players along the way that taught him about the game, both in college and in the NFL. And I just love hearing these stories from players and coaches about how they learned all about the game that we love. But let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into our chat now with Greg in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, happy to welcome back once again to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, our friend Greg Cosell. Greg, welcome back to the podcast, and let's get into a couple of the additions the Eagles reportedly made over the weekend, and we'll start with the safety, the local kid from Philadelphia, Will Parks, who has been with the Denver Broncos over the course of his career. I believe an undrafted free agent. He may have been a seventh-round pick out of Arizona. But, Greg, what are your thoughts on Will Parks and what his skill set is? What has he shown on the field so far throughout his NFL career?
Well, Fran, I was actually really pleased to see that signing because, as you know, I get to watch tape from all NFL teams, and for some reason I've seen a lot of the Denver Broncos defense over the last number of years, and I think Will Parks, he's one of those guys that's an under-the-radar guy just from a national perspective. He predominantly started his career as their dime kind of hybrid safety linebacker when the Broncos played with 6 defensive backs, and he kind of evolved to play more and more to the point where this year under Vic Fangio, he was playing as a starting safety. There were times he lined up over the slot. So in many ways, he can be deployed much the same way Malcolm Jenkins was deployed by the Eagles. Now, I'm not suggesting he's that quality of player because Malcolm Jenkins was is a great player, but I think Will Parks is a really good player who fills that role. He's long. He's about 6'1". He's probably in the 205 to 210 range. He can play, like I said, that hybrid role in your dime, and we know that Jim Schwartz has played a lot more with 6 defensive backs over the last, year or so. He can play on the back end. He can line up over the slot at times. He matched up to tight ends with the Broncos, so that's something he can do in your man coverage concepts. So I think he's a really good addition given the way Jim Schwartz plays because he can fill that Malcolm Jenkins role.
How does he fit, Greg? A few weeks ago when we were out at the Combine, which feels like forever ago now, we had a long conversation about positionless players. Is he a guy that you feel kind of fits into that discussion?
Yes, for sure. And as you and I discussed back then, and as I've been watching tape, and I'm sure the same for you, you see a lot of players now that as you watch them, maybe 5-10 years ago, we would have thought that, they're not really good enough at this one position, so I don't know what they are. But that kind of player now has tremendous value given the amount of sub-defenses that are played and the need to match up to a lot of spread formations where the tight end is spread and detached. So Will Parks is a good player. I don't want to give the impression that I think, he's an all-pro, but I think his traits and his skill set and the way he's been deployed throughout his career fits very well with what the Eagles do.
All right, Greg, let's get to Jatavis Brown now, the linebacker that the Eagles reportedly signed from the LA Chargers. I believe a third-round pick out of the University of Akron. You and I both studied him coming out of college, I believe. I'm pretty sure you studied him as well. What were your thoughts on Jatavis Brown, I guess, coming out of college, and then what he's shown over the last few years with the Chargers?
Well, coming out of college out of Akron, he was a fascinating player because he's short. He's under 6 feet. I think he was under 230 pounds when he came out. And he was really, really good that last year, the tape I watched. He was very good as a pass rusher, and he's very, very athletic and active. If I'm not mistaken, he ran in the 4.4 range. I don't know if it was at the Combine or at his pro day, but he ran in the 4.4 range. And it was interesting with the Chargers. This past year, he played predominantly special teams, but he started in 2018. I would say probably started at least 10 games. He's a certain kind of player. He's really athletic. Obviously, he's not a take-on player in the run game. Is that as important as it was? That reasonable, smart people can discuss that and have different opinions. But he can be used as a blitzer. He's very active. He's very good in coverage. He sort of would be seen as the kind of new breed linebacker. I'm curious if it wasn't that long ago that he came out, but I'm curious if he came out, let's say in this draft, would people say, hey, he's a second round type pick because of his athleticism and his ability to rush the quarterback as well. So he's an interesting signing. You're increasing the speed, range, and athleticism of your defense, and I think you and I have spoke throughout the season when we did our weekly podcast that's something that was really essential for the Eagles to address.
Yeah, and that was honestly one of the things I wanted to ask you about was that you look at all the additions the Eagles have made so far, and Dave Spadaro did a great job of kind of highlighting this over the weekend on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. Was you look at Javon Hargrave, Jatavis Brown, Darius Slay, Will Parks. The Eagles got faster at all three levels of the defense over the last week.
Without question. And I haven't, again, we don't know till they play, but I like the moves overall. You and I talked about Hargrave. Darius Slay, of course, we talked about. Parks, we just spoke about. I think he's a really nice player. And Brown. And obviously they need linebackers, and he's fast. And in today's NFL, I think that's important. The day of the sort of stacked backer who can't really play with much range, I mean, those guys are hard to fit in today's NFL. So one thing about Brown, and he does have a lot of starting experience, is he can run, he has range, and he does have blitz ability. And we saw that this past year, and maybe it's because he didn't feel comfortable with the secondary. We don't know that, but Tim Schwartz did blitz a little more this year. So Brown kind of fits just in terms of his traits and overall skill set.
Well, it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch how this roster continues to be built. Obviously, a long ways to go before we get to training camp and the start of the regular season. Greg, thanks so much for joining us here once again on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Great stuff from Greg, and you could follow him just like I do on Twitter at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And I greatly appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show, but the other way is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, and even leave us a comment. I want to give a shout out to someone who did just that. I asked you guys to go on and leave comments and questions, and you guys came through. We got a couple of good ones, so keep them coming. And again, if you got ideas for shows, things you want to hear about over the next few weeks, feel free, send them in, and I'll do my best not just to answer them here, but also make full shows out of them. So I want to give a shout out to Harris_France34. Went onto our Apple Podcast page, left a 5-star review saying, "Love the show. Quick question. Why have we not talked about the linebacking core? I'm quite frightened. Help me breathe, guys." So obviously this was before the Jatavis Brown signing over the weekend. We just heard from Greg about how he felt about Jatavis Brown, and I think he's a guy, that's got starting experience in the league, can come in, certainly can give you that, but also could be a quality depth piece as well. He's an athletic player, can make plays from sideline to sideline, as we talked about earlier. So just his addition certainly does help give that linebacking core a little bit of a boost. But look, just remember, the offseason, and it's the case now just as it was last Friday, the offseason is still early. There's a lot of ways to acquire talent. The Eagles are not done yet in terms of filling out this roster. The 90-man roster is far from complete, and the picture of what the 53-man roster is a long ways away from being complete. So I know a lot of people are really anxious and excited about, what are the moves going to be? How are they going to continue to improve the team? It's not all going to just happen over the first few days of free agency. There's a ton of time left in this offseason, especially with these circumstances that we're all dealing with. It's a little bit different now than it has been over really just ever in the NFL right now. So we got to be patient. Just kind of let this whole thing play out. The additions of both Parks and Jatavis Brown over the weekend, I think, kind of play to that. And we talked with Greg about how much Parks can come in and help, and all the speed that's been added to this Eagles defense. I think is a really, really big jump here for that group on that side of the ball. So thanks so much to Harris for that comment, and thanks to all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcast offerings on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. All right, let's get to the next part of the show. I told you earlier I caught up with Ike Reese. It's time for Ike Reese in the second part of Chalk Talk. Please be joined this week on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, by my friend Ike Reese. And Ike, the Eagles season is over, but I thought, you know what, let's take some time, just talk about the development of the football player Ike Reese. I want to hear about you coming up as a high school player, college player, as an NFL player, and kind of the different plateaus that you reached from a mental standpoint, because I feel like that's the part of the for fans, that they can learn more about the game. They can see things a certain way. They can watch all 22 and learn about it. So I want to learn more about your development in that area of the game. And I guess that's where I'll kind of start is, who are some of the people that, in your mind really influenced the way that you kind of learned about the game and watched the game?
Well, I had so many, Fran. I was somewhat of a late bloomer, late developer as a player, right? Only playing 1 year in high school. So there was so much I had to learn about the game of football, just from an individual standpoint, learning how to be a better player, the things I need to do in order to be a better player, but also just understanding the game of football.
Yeah.
Why we do what we do. What's the offense or the defense trying to do to you? Why are these concepts so important? Why is it important for all 11 guys to do their job and how they all tie in together? So I didn't know how to watch film, right? We didn't watch a whole lot of film. We watched video when I was in high school. But
why did you only play 1 year of high school?
Oh, long story short, I was not eligible to play my senior year in high school because it was my fifth year in high school.
Got it.
So,
okay. Yep.
I was more of a basketball player, played football my junior year because the football coach saw me, felt like I had a brighter future in football than I did basketball.
Did you play both ways?
Yeah, I did play both ways.
You play on
I was a
offense?
receiver.
Oh,
in the run and shoot.
It comes out.
Yes,
I've never knew this.
Yes, in the run and shoot offense, I was one of the slot receivers.
Does Mike Quick know this?
He does not know this. I don't really brag about it, right? I don't really brag about it because I think I only had 3 touchdowns in that year.
Right.
So
that's 3 more than I had in high school.
I wasn't the primary weapon, but I was a big target.
Yep.
I was a big third down possession type of guy.
All right.
And it's funny because I actually thought that's why Michigan State was recruiting me and bringing me to school there,
right.
And it was to play defense. And I wasn't very big in high school, so when I got to Michigan State and I'm looking at some of these linebackers, Rob Fredrickson, who was a first-round draft pick of the Raiders, he was the senior linebacker my freshman year, and he's like 6'3", 240 pounds.
Right.
I was like 6'3", 195 pounds.
Sure.
So I'm saying to myself, y'all sure y'all want me to play linebacker? I'm built more like the receivers.
Right.
They're like, son, you don't run fast enough to play wide receiver. Yeah, you're a good linebacker. Speed.
Right.
So here's the thing funny. I redshirted, right, my freshman year.
Okay.
And my roommate, who eventually turned out to be my best friend, best man at my wedding, my godfather of my son, Reggie Garnett.
Okay.
He started as a freshman, actually won Big Ten Freshman of the Year at linebacker. So we were roommates, and because I wasn't playing, when he would watch film, he taught me how to watch film. He was a smart kid, played 4 years in high school at a very good high school football program, and that's why he was able to come in and start as a freshman because he was so intelligent.
Right.
Running George Perlis's 4-3 stunt defense isn't easy for anybody. I think he was the first freshman to ever play in it. So he used to, when he would break down the game film, he would teach me what I'm looking at. I didn't know. I'm just running around,
Right.
just as a scout team guy, but I also don't really know what I'm doing.
Right.
And so he would teach me how to watch offensive linemen, how to read the fullback. The fullback could tell you where the running play is going. Now, this is back in two-back days where it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Right, you don't see much of that anymore.
Right,
Yeah.
so you had a lot more pulling guards, pulling tackles, traps, counters, things of that nature. And he was the first one that really could get through to me as to how to watch film so that when I was watching it, I knew what I was looking at.
Okay.
Prior to that, I would just be in meetings acting as if I knew what I was looking at,
Shaking
but
your head
not
to say
really
yes.
knowing.
Yeah, right.
Not really knowing. So he was the first guy that taught me. And then I was blessed. I had good coaches. I was blessed to be around some smart defensive minds that as I began to play more at Michigan State, and I was asked to do more. Those guys helped me understand defense. Hank Buller was my defensive coordinator.
And he just passed?
He just passed away, Dr. Defense. And he was the first. And that was a 3-4 defense. So I had to learn how to play the rush linebacker. And we had a position called the joker.
Okay.
So, and that was me. I would line up in different gaps, and I could blitz and I could rush. So I had to learn, how to read an offense and find out where the weak area was there. And then playing for Dean Pease and Nick Saban to finish out my college career.
That usually can do some good things for you.
Yeah, Nick Saban's a pretty good coach. So I give him a lot of credit for me really developing into a linebacker that could play at the next level. Understanding the game to where I could play at the next level, because that's just what he demanded of everyone, not knowing just what you in your position does, but why the defensive line is doing what they're doing, why their responsibility is that gap, why yours is that gap, where are the safeties going to feel in the run game. That's why it's important for you to stay in this gap and not jump out of it, because somebody's filling outside of you and he's expecting you to be in the inside.
So is that when it clicked for you, like big picture-wise?
Yes.
So it was like Dean Pease and Nick Saban when that staff got in.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it, because Hank just Coach Buller really just used my athleticism, right? Just said, get after the quarterback.
Yeah.
He's young. We don't have time. Just let him go. Let him go. And that actually helped me out from a confidence standpoint. But in order to take my game to the next level, I knew I had to, from a mental standpoint, start to understand the game of football. And so Coach Saban, who can be very demanding.
So I've heard.
Yeah, it put the pressure on all of us to understand defense as a whole.
I think it's interesting because, a lot of people, we're so used to watching football through that scope of how we see it on TV, or, maybe you go and you see it on person on the field. It's a different vantage point. But when you watch it via the All-22, I remember my first time watching it, and I went into it thinking I know the game. I know football. I've watched it for, my whole life. And then you first watch it for the first time, it's a different, being able to see things big picture took a lot. It took years and years and years for me to kind of be able to see it. Yeah. And I don't want to say I learned through like osmosis. I was around coaches and they kind of helped me along, but it took a few years before it clicked. Yeah. And I was able to see offensively and defensively how all of the pieces, all 11 guys kind of work together.
And you'll never watch football the same.
Never. No.
Right? And I've never, since I left high school to go to college, and once I started to understand how to break down film and watch film, I've never been able to watch a game the same without viewing it from an all-22 standpoint. Even though you're watching it on TV, I'm still trying to see the whole picture. I'm trying to see the entire offensive formation. And that's the other thing. It's one thing to learn what you're supposed to do on your side of the football and how the other parts work around you. But you take your game to the next level when you start understanding what the other side of the football is trying to do to you. Right. And that's from an offense or defensive standpoint. Yeah. The smartest offensive players know how to see that whole defense, that whole picture, and where everybody is going to be at. When they say that's not just the responsibility of quarterbacks, right? And they tell quarterbacks to be able to take that picture of the defense, right, and know where everybody is at. Well, that goes for the other offensive players, running backs, wide receivers. And from a defensive standpoint, you need to know what everybody is doing. It makes the game easier for you because now you can anticipate.
Right.
Instead of reacting to everything a step or two slower, you can anticipate this is going to happen, and it gives you just a step or two quicker.
So when you started to see it from both sides, was that still with that same staff, or did that wait until you got to the NFL?
Oh, that was in the pros. Oh, yeah, that was in the pros.
Was that more like Ray Rhodes and that staff, or was it more Jim Johnson?
More Jim Johnson. Let me tell you, I thought I understood football, playing under Nick and playing under Dean Pease at Michigan State. My rookie year, with Ray Rhodes and Emmett Thomas as our defensive coordinator, we ran something called automatic fronts and coverage.
Okay.
So they would give you that call, but throughout the week and preparation and study, there's 5 or 6 calls built into the automatic fronts and coverage. So the defense is being called based on
the offense.
What the offense shows you. but it's happening in real time on the field.
Right.
So do you realize how many everybody has to know the defense? Like, I can't rely on this guy to tell me what to do. Like, we all have to be on the same page and recognize the same offensive formation and then be in sync with the coverage, the run fronts, and everything else. And as a rookie, I just didn't play enough.
That's like, I'm just imagining like the mental Rolodex that's got to that's spinning in your head.
Well, our two smartest players, William Thomas, Willie T,
right,
and Mike Zordich.
Okay, yep.
The safety and they were our two smartest players over there. They knew everything over there, and they would have to basically call out the defense for the rest of the guys out there. But as a young player, not getting enough reps at it, I was never comfortable with it. And so that was almost like a year that was almost wasted. I wound up playing defensive end
right, yep.
in that year because we had so many players hurt. But I never did get that defense down. I never fully grasped that defense because I just didn't play enough. And then when Jim came in.
Different world.
Yeah, Jim brought in a whole – but you know what? With Jim's defense was hard for all of us. But it was great that it was all of us. The one thing about Emmett's defense is that I was a rookie with guys that were already here who knew the defense.
Okay.
Who had been with those guys for 4 years, 3 or 4 years.
So this leveled the playing field. Everyone had to learn the system together.
We all had to learn Jim's defense, so we're all making mistakes.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
We're all making mistakes and learning it at the same time. And it was so much fun because it was an attack style defense. And Jim's concept was break down the pass protection.
Right.
And I never learned defense that way. So now you're taking it to another level of learning how to break down an offense, figure out a weakness, and everything we did from an attack standpoint was based on where we thought the weak part of the pass protection was going to be. And Jim could call defenses to dictate to the offense to get us the look that we wanted. So he was ahead of his time from that standpoint.
What was that like from a communication standpoint during the week? Was it early on where you guys said, like, all right, like, coach, like, this is the guy, like 78, like, I want this guy? Like, I think you had told me before that Trot would come in and kind of say, like, set me up on this guy, A-gap blitz. Like, I want this guy.
Yes.
And then Jim Johnson was like, all right, like, we'll get you. and
that came with time, right? That wasn't in the beginning.
That wasn't year one.
No, that wasn't maybe all the way up to year 2 or 3 where, Jim wouldn't allow players to tinker with the defense.
Okay.
But by year 2 or 3, guys knew the defense well. And the great thing in Jim's defense was he could find ways to use everyone, right? So, and use them to the best of their ability. Give you a couple examples. Obviously, you can only start 11 guys, but Jim would play 17, 18 guys on defense. So, Al Harris was our third corner, but he was best at bump and run. He was not a good zone coverage guy. Right? So you got to let Bobby go play in a nickel.
Yep.
Let Al play on the outside. Most of the coverages are going to be called man to his side. Troy, obviously, being the seasoned vet that he was and versatile, he could play man or zone, and Jim could figure out how to call defenses to their strength. You brought up Jeremiah. Jeremiah's a guy who is better going forward than he is going backwards. So Trot, in order to take on these linemen in the run game, that's the one thing we love about Jeremiah, that he loved playing the run.
Right.
He loved playing the run. He loved going downhill, smashing offensive linemen. So eventually, Jim put in defenses where the middle linebacker is basically an extra lineman. He's attacking the A-gap, or he's a zero on top of the center. Oh, he loves smashing centers.
Okay.
Yeah, Trot loves smashing centers. They didn't want
you could tell on film watching him that that's how he was.
He loved jacking up centers. And Jim would do that. And then obviously we know what he did with Brian, the ultimate weapon.
Right.
Yeah, the ultimate weapon. And even with me in his Okie defenses and his nickel defenses, I played the joker in those defenses. And listen, you're talking about a guy 220, 225 pounds. I got to run line stunts with the D linemen, setting picks and things of that nature. And he gave me the confidence to be able to do that. He gave me the confidence to be able to do that. And because I was really a part of the D-line from a pass rushing standpoint, I learned why you run line stunts up front.
Who helped you kind of understand that?
Hollis.
Hollis. Okay.
Yeah, Hollis was my teacher.
All right.
In the inside, Hollis would tell me, stay outside.
Just stay out of my way.
Don't bring your little you-know-what inside here. Stay on the outside. Use that speed. Hollis would have to tell me when we had calls that it could be a TE stunt or an ET stunt based on where the back was lined up at or what have you when I was younger.
Right.
Hollis would tell me, okay, we got it right. Oh, it's a Ricky or a Lucy. So he would have to be the one signaling to me the calls that we had to run.
Yeah, D tackles usually are the ones who call those stunts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so he was the guy that was helping me up front. And the funny thing is, I got better at being able to pass rush by helping Trey pass protect.
Okay, interesting.
Juan Castillo used to have me go up against Trey after practice to give Trey help with speed guys.
Okay.
If he was going to play a speed guy that week and they wanted somebody who could just, hump the corner, give him speed on the outside, Juan would be over there teaching me how to pass rush, how to get off. And working with Trey, I learned things I could do with offensive linemen.
Right.
Right? Because at first it was just use your speed to try to get around them.
Yeah.
And then it became, okay, use counter moves, use your hands, stab with the inside arm, and you may be able to get him with a spin back to the inside or an up and under move, So it's funny, man. I was like a blank canvas that really soaked up a lot of tutelage from coaches and players, just soaking up as much as I could.
When you guys made that switch over to Jim Johnson's unit, you talked about it was, Willie T and Zordich were those guys for Ray Rhodes and Emmett Thomas. Who were the guys that, from a mental standpoint, just it clicked so quick with Jim and they kind of taught everybody else?
Oh man, I tell you, Mike Caldwell was one.
Okay, yep.
Mike was one. He was also Mike was the guy who taught me how to be a pro and what it meant to be a role player and how, you can play a long time.
People don't. I feel. I don't want to cut you off, but people don't understand that. I feel like that it takes a specific skill set. You may be an all-conference player, 4-year starter in college,
most of us are,
and you don't. Maybe you didn't play special teams, and you didn't play sub package, and you don't.
And I never did any of that in college.
But now you come to the NFL, and you have to do that. You have to learn, and you have to embrace that role.
Yeah. And Mike was the first one to tell me that. He was in his 6th year when I was in my rookie year, and he was like, man, listen, you never know when your opportunity is going to come. First of all, be prepared whenever it does come, but then, embrace special teams, but also find your role, find a role, and it sunk in. And I kept working at it and eventually found a role in Jim Johnson's defense as a third down guy and played that guy for 4 years for him in that defense.
It's not surprising that Mike went on to be an NFL coach.
Man, it's not surprising at all because he was one of the smartest ones in the room. Even though he wasn't a starter in their first year, he was their third down back. He and Willie T were the third down guys until Jeremiah became a 3-down linebacker. Even Dalk struggled in the early parts of it with the defense. Troy was obviously very smart in that defense. And they brought in our safety coach now, the missile, Tim Houck.
Sure, yeah.
And Jim, he and Jim had a relationship prior somewhere else. I don't know if Tim played for him.
Okay.
Maybe in Indy.
In Seattle or Indy,
or Indy, one of those places. Tim had played for him, and so Tim knew the defense.
Right.
And that was Dalk's first safety partner back there in Jim's defense. It was Tim.
Sure.
So Tim would make a lot of the calls, early on.
Interesting. So, from a special team standpoint, I think a lot of people and a lot of fans and a lot of our listeners look at special teams and say, well, it's just, especially from coverage standpoint, run and go hit the guy. When you first had to make that switch over,
By the way, that's what I thought it was.
That's what I mean. When did that kind of light go off for you? Where it's more than that. I gotta understand my assignment, how I fit with my alley and my lane that I'm running downfield. When did that click?
The first mini camp. John Harbaugh.
Okay, got it. And real quick, Ron Rivera was the linebacker coach,
yes,
right? Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
Oh, man, Ron. Yeah, Ron was our linebacker coach. We had such a great
that staff is
coaching staff, man.
Yeah.
Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier, Steve Spagnuolo, John Harbaugh, Tommy Brazier, Jim Johnson. That's all on defense.
Staff. I know. That's crazy.
It's crazy, man. And it's funny because they were young.
Right.
Ron and Spags and Leslie, they were young. And I think they were in their first year coaching in the gym. They were treated,
they're all learning
They
too.
were treated just like the players.
I was going to say, they're all learning too.
Oh, yeah. Jim would be out there yelling at everybody. Coaches, players, everybody. Because they were learning the defense too.
Sure.
And they had to learn what Jim wanted out of the defense. So with John, with Harbaugh, man, I learned in his first year, it was his first year in the NFL as a special teams coach. And when he was coaching us, the attention to detail, we knew in our rookie year, my rookie year, 3-13, we knew that we were probably the second best unit on the team, if not the best unit on the team of that 3-13 team. And it was because of John's schemes, his attention to detail, how hard we practiced. Man, we practiced hard. And we were out there 45 minutes to an hour, and he didn't waste 1 second of it, and we were better for it. He made me and others love playing special teams.
What was your favorite unit? I think I know the answer to that, but what's your favorite unit?
Of all the special
teams units?
Oh, wow, man. Oh, man. It would probably have to be... It would probably be the year from 2000 to 02. The years that B. Mitch was here.
Okay, got it.
Because he was another guy who came in and his personality fit with us. It fit with that unit, and he was our ringleader. And it was like he made it fun playing special teams. When we went out there, we strived every week to make 2 or 3 difference making plays in the game.
Yep.
And back then we would run fake punts, onside kicks, fake field goals, things of that nature. We had all types of incentives to run down there and make tackles inside the 20, big hits.
Was
all
kickoff
those
coverage your favorite?
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
Hit squad.
Yeah, okay.
No doubt about it. And that's back when they still allowed four-man wedges.
Right.
Four-man wedges. So the funny thing about that, right, my evolution as a cover guy, and I talked about Mike earlier, he was our special teams leader when I first got here.
Mike Caldwell.
Mike Caldwell. So, I was the young, wild guy that would run down there to want to prove how tough I am.
Right.
So Mike would allow me, go run down there, blow up the wedge, right? And he's making all the tackles. And I'm thinking, I get the pat on the back for blowing up the wedge, but I really ain't getting the glory that I want by making plays. So it took me a year or two to realize, dummy, don't you be the first one down there. Let somebody else go be first. And the runner is going to break off of that.
Right.
And you got to be in place to make plays. And so by my third year, I realized that, it's all right to be the kamikaze.
Yep.
Yeah, but they don't send those guys to the Pro Bowl. The guys that make the tackles are the ones they send across the water to Hawaii.
So with kickoff coverage, all those guys, they're not all, as I just said, they're not all just running downfield trying to make the tackle. Some guys are contained players. Yep. Some guys used to be able to the wedge busters, and
we used to run cross stunts.
Right.
We used to do all type of cool stuff with John. That's what I'm saying. He made it fun.
Right.
He made it fun to do. Like we would run pick plays. Where, where you give a guy an opportunity to get down in front of you a little bit, he's knocking off your guy that's blocking you, and you're coming off his butt, and now the wedge doesn't know who to block, and now you got a free hit there. So we used to love doing stuff like that. And the best thing about playing special teams back in those days is that the offense and the defense loved watching us play.
Right.
They loved being in our meetings when we put the highlight film on from the previous week, and John would show the big hits and all that stuff. All the veterans loved coming in watching us because we had the most energetic group of the three phases.
Right.
Like we were all a little off.
But that's what I mean. You need that
Yeah.
because when the defense is coming onto the field, there's nothing better than when the kickoff unit is coming off and they just got somebody down inside the 15 and they're going bananas down there. And then same thing when the offense is coming on the field and they just had all kinds of juice because there was some big return or a big block on the return. Like you give those guys a little bit of juice when they get on the field.
And back then, I know we had a couple of those years where we must have finished first 3 times at least before I got out of here in 2004 after the Super Bowl season. So in my 7 years here, we must have finished first at least 3 times, and in the top 5, I would say 5 times in the 7 years that I was here. We were regularly one of the best, if not the best, special teams unit in the league. And that's why John went and got the respect that he got as a coach, because he showed a decade of running a unit that produced some pretty good players and was always at the top.
How early did you know he'd be a head coach?
Our kicker even wanted to make tackles.
No.
Akers even wanted to get in there and make tackles.
How early did you know that he was going to be a head coach?
Ooh, I think pretty early in his career. I didn't know at the NFL level, though.
Interesting.
Because you just didn't see special teams coaches become NFL coaches. So I always thought he's going to be a good college coach somewhere, because he always had the college spirit, right? The ability, that energy, and the ability to get after players like college coaches do.
Right, yep.
I mean, that's what he did. He got after you if you weren't doing it right, and he wasn't afraid to get in your face. And I saw him get after starters when they had to pay attention for certain phases, whether it was field goal block, punt safe. If you were in a John Harbaugh meeting, you had better treat it like your offensive meeting or your defensive meeting. And everybody in the building respected him for that. All the players respected him for that. And so I knew that he had the ability to be a leader of men. That didn't surprise me. And by the time he became head coach, I wasn't surprised at all. By the time he got the opportunity to do it, I wasn't surprised at all.
So just from this conversation, it sounds, and tell me if I'm wrong, college, the player that influenced you most was Reggie.
Yep.
Okay. That was your Reggie.
That's Garnett.
Reggie Garnett. Okay, so Reggie Garnett.
Rest in peace.
Yep. Sorry to hear that. Coach-wise, Dean Pease or Nick Saban?
Dean Pease.
Okay.
Nick,
and he's still coach. I mean, he was still coach. Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. I talked to him earlier this year, the preseason game.
Right, okay.
When we played Tennessee in the preseason. Love that dude. He was a big help for me. He wanted me to be a coach. He's the first guy who told me, whenever football is over with, why don't you be a coach?
How you liking that decision?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good not being a coach. I'm good on that. I do think about it, though, from time to time.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Dean was the guy I worked with the most. It was obviously Coach Saban's defense.
Sure.
And he sat in on our defensive team meetings. But Coach Pease was obviously the defensive coordinator.
All right, and then you go to the NFL. Mike Caldwell?
Yeah. Because I would say without Mike, I don't know if I would have accepted the role early in my career, because I was like most young players.
Yeah.
I'm a 4-year starter at Michigan State, 2-time captain, all that stuff, all conference, all that stuff. I'm like, hey, man, I can play. I should be out there playing. And so it can get frustrating, but I realized he was the first one that made me realize what my actual dream was. It wasn't to be a starting linebacker in the NFL. It was to play in the NFL.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense.
And that helped me turn into a 9-year career. So, yeah, I would say definitely him.
Coach-wise?
That's
tough, man.
I would have to say who had the most, I would have to say John.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would have to say, because I worked with him
and you had so much success with him.
Yeah. And he was the guy who told me my rookie year when I was having a tough year, trying to figure out how to balance being an aggressive player out there playing hard and then playing smart.
Okay.
Right? Got a lot of penalties and stuff that hurt the team in our rookie year. And John was like, man, you got the ability to play in this league for 10 years. And you just got to harness it the correct way.
Right.
And we had so many one-on-one meetings
I was going to ask you, so you were special teams captain, you had those, right?
Yeah, we had so many one-on-one meetings. And John, I've known since I was 17.
Yeah.
Since I was in high school.
Huh.
He recruited me.
He was at Miami, Ohio?
University of Cincinnati.
He was at Cincinnati, okay.
Yeah, so he was the defensive backs coach there. And we laugh about this. We even laughed about this summer when Baltimore came up here for the joint practices.
Right.
We tell this story. He was upset that I committed to Michigan State before I had the opportunity to take an official visit to Cincinnati. I had promised him that I would not make a commitment to Michigan State or to anybody before I take the trip.
What sold you at Michigan State?
Big Ten.
Okay.
That's where I wanted to go,
right.
A Big Ten school. I had just had a great time.
Yeah. That visit worked well for you? See, that's what a lot of coaches like.
I committed Saturday morning. I got there Friday night. I was like, I went up. By the time I went there to see George Perlis for my one-on-one, I was like, hey, I'm here, coach. If you want me, I'm here, man.
A lot of coaches in college think like, oh, we want to get that last visit, the last impression before signing day. Forget that, man.
Get the first one, man. Get the first impression, man. And it was the only official visit I took.
There we go. That's all it took.
I had one set for Illinois, and I had one set for Cincinnati.
Right.
And I didn't take, and I had one for Ball State.
Okay.
And I didn't take them because I committed there. But yeah, John was not happy about that.
That's too funny.
And it's funny. My senior year, he's at Indiana, and we play against each other.
Right.
And I hadn't seen him since our meeting after I committed to Michigan State. And he was like, man, I'm proud of you. You made the right decision. I'm proud of the way your career turned out. And I was like, hey, coach, look, you're here in Indiana, man. If I'd have went to Cincinnati, you would have been gone anyway. You'd have left. And then it's funny, we both wind up here.
In Philly, yeah, sure.
We both wind up here. And he was like, I still remember the meeting when I came from minicamp.
The first one?
The first meeting. And he was like, took a few years,
right?
But I wound up getting you anyway.
That's
and I was
funny.
like, man, that is crazy. So yeah, I would say, yeah, he would have to be number one, and then obviously Ron Rivera, and then Jim.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's you work with a lot of big names there.
Man, I'm telling you, man, you don't realize it until I start to rattle off names that I played for. But watching Coach Saban, I'm like,
that guy, yeah.
Yeah, that dude. I'm like, I didn't know he was going to turn into that dude. Man, greatest college football coach ever? Wow.
Yeah, you know him when. Well, I appreciate the time here. Thanks for giving us some insight into your development as a football player. We'll talk to you soon here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast.
No problem, Fran. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was a really fun conversation I had with Ike. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. I love the story about him and John Harbaugh. I honestly had no idea that they went as far back as his high school recruitment. That was a cool nugget that I did not know about with those two and their relationship. I know that they're very, very close, but that was a really cool story there that Ike was able to share. A lot of cool stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed that chat. Again, like I said last week, I hope everyone out there is being safe. I hope everyone out there is healthy. Again, please be smart with what you're doing. Be sure, obviously, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. All of those bullet points, but practice social distancing whenever possible. We will get through this, but just make sure that we're listening to our local officials and doing everything possible to keep each other safe. All that being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the Duffy House, I'm Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.